Hey everyone, we're going to go ahead and get started. I guess I'd first say hello to all of you. My name is Jonathan. I am a solutions engineer here at Qodo. I am joined by my colleague David. David, actually, do you want to introduce yourself real quick?
Hi, I'm David Perry, and I'm the developer advocate here at Qodo. And can I do some of the housekeeping real quick?
Oh yeah, let's do the
Yeah.
housekeeping stuff. Let's do the fun stuff.
Okay, cool. So I just wanted to say, you can go ahead and we have Q&A. And so if you have any questions or answers or any questions you want, please feel free to fill that out, and we'll try to get them answered either through the chat or live here on our video. And I don't believe we still don't do the chat yet. So if you have anything like that, please feel free to go ahead and only ask the questions and answers through that, and we will try to get to them. If we do not reach your question or it's something we can't answer right now, we will get back to you on it, and we will ensure that we get those questions answered. Cool.
Beautiful. Otherwise, I think all of you are on mute. You don't have to worry about accidentally coming off mute or anything like that. We hope that you enjoy the presentation today. I think that one of the things we'll do first is kind of get you all up to speed on what it is that we're doing. Some of you actually have recently started an evaluation. Some of you are thinking about maybe whether or not this is something you want to evaluate. And so no matter where you are in your journey right now, hopefully we can cover you. I guess the first part about this as we drive in, actually, if you want to follow along today at all on any of the things that we're demoing, particularly the IDE extension, if you happen to be using like VS Code or JetBrains, there is a Qodo.ai/get started URL here. You could go there, you could install the extension, or you could just look up Qodo inside of your IDE marketplace. Again, JetBrains, VS Code, and you could probably install it if you wanted to. In any case, the first part about this that we're going to talk about here. So Qodo, the name Qodo, by the way, it sounds like might be a weird name to some of you. The idea is that, our product line is all about quality code. We're building an integrity platform, a code integrity platform, and so hence Qodo, quality code. Today we have two primary offerings we're going to talk about. We have Qodo Gen, which is an IDE extension, works with VS Code, JetBrains. If you happen to be using another type of IDE out there, if any of you still like on Eclipse, for example, sadly we do not support that today, but nonetheless, stick around. I'm sure we'll be able to show you some valuable things that might be worth your time. Um, Likewise, the other product we're going to be talking about is Qodo Merge. So the idea here is that it actually goes side by side with as an app for like GitHub, GitLab, Bitbucket, Azure DevOps, and this actually helps with code reviews. In both cases, you're going to see a mixture of productivity, but then again, also that quality component. Again, one of the things as we look as we look on the Qodo Gen side, you're going to see a lot more tools, more than just code generation, where we're going to be focusing on like generating tests, analyzing your code, and pointing out ways to make it better, and so forth. And then on the Qodo merge side, again, we're going to be not only helping you to do faster code reviews, but helping you to be able to do them more effectively, to point out things that you might have overlooked, and making sure that you're able to be able to again find that sweet spot of productivity as well as quality. Some of the key use cases that I might highlight here, kind of take a look at some of these headers. Um, these are the top use cases that we see, such as code generation, context-aware refactoring, code maintenance, onboarding new devs, test creation, or even better code reviews, as you would imagine. But this is just the beginning, right? This is just the top ones. The reality is there's a lot of things our product can do. My hope as we go through this today is that each of you will be able to find at least one solid use case that would be meaningful to you to help you in your daily lives. And so while it probably will fall in one of these six buckets, it's very possible that you find something else that would be helpful to you. So kind of keep an eye out for that today. And if you, for some reason, you've got certain tasks on your plate that you're thinking, hey, can Qodo actually help me with that? And I'm not talking about it. Let's go ahead and talk about it, right? Bring it up in the Q&A panel, and we can make sure to address that for you. So let's go ahead and get started then. I'm going to dive in right into the product. I'm actually going to start from a flow perspective. I'm going to start from the IDE. And let's go ahead and in this case, I'm going to be using PyCharm. And last time we did this webinar, we did VS Code. We're trying to be friendly to everybody. Likewise, last time we did this, we actually did a bit of a focus on Python. This time we're going to be using TypeScript. The reality is, if you're using any of the major coding languages, Java, JavaScript, TypeScript, Go, PHP, Ruby, like you're in very good shape. So in any case. Let me give you kind of introduce you to the project that we're going to be working on today and some of the things we're going to be doing. We actually have a project here that's called Screenshot to Code. As the name implies, the project is actually meant to really take a screenshot that someone uploads and be able to turn that into code that they could use. So this could be like you could take a screenshot of like Hacker News and import it. You could go ahead and take a screenshot of maybe a Figma diagram. The idea is to kind of make that quick and easy for you. Now, as part of that, this project actually has a Python backend. You'll see lots of Python files here in the back end, as well as in the front end. We've got some TypeScript that we're working with. And so the idea here is to kind of, we're going to be focusing more on the front end today. We can't really do everything for the sake of time. But like the story that we're going to be running through here actually is that as part of the code, one of the things that we've been discovering is that there's a part of the code that seems to be a source of tech debt. There's really not much tests. It's a source of bugs. Likewise, it's probably a large type of piece of code that could be broken down into smaller components. And so one of the things, if you've been in this situation before, and you're thinking to yourself, okay, I need to go into this code I've never worked with before. How do I go about like introducing myself to that code that I may have never seen before? Or frankly, maybe I wrote it 2 or 3 years ago and I have no idea what I did or why I did it. And so one of the first things that we can do here, if I actually go, you're going to notice in the plugin here on the left side, I can open up a chat panel. And one of the first things I want to introduce you to that's incredibly valuable, if any of you have ever worked with AI before, whether it's Chat GPT, whether it's another tool like GitHub Copilot, whatever it might be, you're probably aware that context is king, right? Or it could be queen too. Maybe we'll say context is royalty. But the idea is that to be able to have context of your code when you're asking a product like ours to do something is really, really important. So what we're going to do here is I'm going to add a focus, as the name implies here. And actually, before I add a focus, I'm going to play around with just adding some extra context. In this case, again, we're going to assume I really don't know too much about the project or where I need to go. And I'm going to come in here and I'm going to add in a folder or part of the project. And again, in this case, I'm not familiar with the project, so I'm just going to add in the full project as part of the index. And for the briefest moment, you saw like a little progress line and it disappeared. It actually just indexed that project. And what I'm going to do now is start with really kind of the basics, which is okay, the problem is really kind of this place where people are importing an image. So let's go ahead and ask it, oh, what part of this project involves uploading an image? And now that it actually kind of knows my code, I can use this to start doing researching. Now, keep in mind, when I think about like a flow of a demo here, right? The first part is really learning about the code that I'm working with, kind of ideating, researching, things like that before I start actually making changes. And so one of the first things I want to do here is kind of talk about this sort of use case. Now, as I look at this, if I scroll up to the top here, it's actually telling me right out of the gate that the image upload functionality is primarily handled by the image upload component. Well, that's nice. Um, but like as I scroll down, it gives me more details about this component. It gives me some code. It actually gives me the code snippet right here. And then likewise, if I go down to the bottom and I look at references, this also helps me to learn a little bit more about the code I'm working with, where I can see here that it actually gives me several different files. In fact, there's an image upload file, TSX file that I could go to as well. And so again, showing you kind of like how we could actually use this to be able to peel back layers of the onion. Actually, David, I've been kind of talking a lot. I'm actually kind of curious to hear from you when you're indexing a project and you're just trying to like use that index to learn different things about what you're working on. Is there any other good examples of things that you've used in kind of trying to do research or other ideas you've seen customers use? Oh, you're on mute, my friend.
I'm sorry, the Q&A is just flying off the
It's
hooks.
blowing up. It is. So
Yeah.
you're like Jonathan. Actually, don't stop. Keep going because the
Well,
Q
yeah.
and A is
And
going crazy right now. Are there
so
any
the
good questions we want to pull into the top
Well, I was
conversation
going
right
to
now?
say one, I did answer one, but for maybe someone else that might have this, I made sure it was public. In your when you're doing the indexing, the one thing if you go to the Qodo down at the bottom lower right and look at you can set these parameters of how much you can index. So if you see that
Mm.
your memory is getting out of whack, if it's too large and you want to limit that, you can limit that space or make it larger too. So I recommend you kind of mess with that to kind of turn the knobs to get your best results when it comes to how much to index.
Can you guys actually see the pop-up window that just happened? I have a
Nope.
settings window. No, you can't. Okay. In any case, if you click on the little Coda icon in the bottom right, you can bring up settings, and there's you can't see the pop-up menu, but the idea is that you can select settings and you can see some of the other options that are available. That's a great like kind of power user move for sure.
And and then and you were saying some other things for the like the setup for ragging you're saying on the data. I forgot. I didn't hear what
Yeah,
you were.
yeah. So basically, I just went ahead and indexed this whole project here. I'm just trying to, at this early stage, I'm just trying to learn a little bit more about this project I'm working on.
In this scenario, I've used it professionally to find bug is like or get a bug report. I think is a huge
Ooh.
one for me.
In fact, let's talk about that one. So, like, since we have this project index, let's pretend for a moment that I'm in a debugging mode. Again, kind of a research phase, right? Before I make changes to my code, I need to understand what might be the root cause or whatnot. I actually have an example of this. I actually have an error log here of a stack trace that was generated from this. And I'm just going to go ahead and like dump this into chat for a moment. By the way, I'm not really telling the AI what to do. In this case, I love this. I just dump an error message, which by the way is something I might do to one of my colleagues in Slack, and go ahead and just drop it in here and see what happens. And look, it's kind of like what's the word I'm looking for? It's kind of deciphering what I'm trying to do. And as part of this, I'm actually going to scroll up here in just a second. It actually says this error occurs when trying to parse invalid JSON data received. So it is understanding effectively what's happening here, and it's actually not just understanding that. It's already kind of preemptively helping me to understand how I might remediate this. It's telling me to add an error handling, and then also to add validation before parsing, and giving me the actual code of how I might actually go ahead and approach that. So anyway, just kind of a really cool thing. If you guys are doing debugging and you want to drop error messages, again, because we have the entire context of the project selected right now, it knows like how those stack traces come about and whatnot, and can actually help you to get to the root cause a lot quicker.
So
Um,
there was some other I think this goes great into the I have a question from Aaron about like hit or misses on getting certain responses back. So when we hit on that, I think we can answer that one, Aaron, live with using the best practices. I don't know if you want to tackle that now or not.
yeah, we'll tackle best practices in a little bit, I think. I think there'll be a good time to kind of talk about that, and maybe that'll help out Aaron. So let's go. And the only other one that I'm noticing in here, I think it's like you're typing an answer for is, can you add external context like React docs? I mean, the solution in that case, David, I'm just kind of curious to get your opinion on that. Like,
Well, I
that's just a
was typing
situation. Yeah, it's like the situation. I mean, my personal opinion on that situation is, the underlying models that we're using already kind of index that stuff. So like we're already in kind of good shape. It's kind of baked in. I think the key for me and this might come back to best practices here in a little bit, is like, what are your coding practices? Like there's like the docs and stuff like that, but then also I think like internal documentation to kind of supplement that is really where the indexing, the extra indexing and context can really be helpful. And we'll definitely be using that as a theme as we go through here because when we're generating quality code, it's not just based on the standards of some public website out there or documentation. It's also about what your company does. Like everything from something silly and innocuous, maybe like the number of characters in a line of code, but could also be things like you have certain documentation standards and templates that you might use. We'll talk about those things as we progress.
Yeah, I wanted to hit on to that, Jonathan, is yeah, you are right on like the models have been trained on certain ones, and that kind of fits with the best practices where you're like, well, yeah, but it was getting the old docs. So in your best practice, you can actually describe or say, use the latest and greatest documentation of this version for this JavaScript library. The other thing to hit on is the enterprise level of this, not to be a sales guy, but we only have this because obviously we can connect to all your repos. But if you are on the enterprise, you can connect your company's repositories where that they can show up. And so you can do tagging in other repositories and have them ragged where you could have like a golden repository is something that you want the user or the developer to pick to get examples or search or have that influence your ask, not just your current repository, your current repo.
So let's talk about one other quick thing then, David, on this same topic. There's a brand new question that just came in here actually, which is about external contexts which are not indexed, right? That can happen, right? Every model has a cutoff date, right? Where it doesn't really know anything beyond that point, beyond the point that it was trained or based on the data it was trained on. I mean, in that situation, I mean, my immediate reaction actually is like, there's a few different paths. One, of course, is like the adding the extra context here. But like almost in that sort of a situation, like I would almost say like you could even open up like a second window and maybe have that open source project in opened, downloaded, cloned locally, and indexed, and you could use that also as a second window maybe in that situation. I don't know. Any thoughts on how you might handle a situation like that, David?
Um, and you know what? I'm sorry. We have so many
Oh, no
questions.
worries.
Like I wasn't paying attention. I was letting you answer that. I was trying to answer other people, but yeah, go on again. Again, how were
It
you
was it
gonna?
was more of a situation. You know what? I think we'll take my answer for now. We'll have to move
Yeah.
along. We've got a lot to cover. But I'll let you continue answering questions, David, and we're gonna move along with the demo and kind of get you guys introduced to some other things. But yeah, in that sort of situation, there's a couple of different ways you could approach it. If answers I provided aren't satisfactory, let's connect after the call and let's try to figure out a solution for you. Speaking of which, the other thing I would touch upon, because this is also highly related, is LLMs. And you'll see down here, there's like a large variety of LLMs that are available for everything from GPT 4.0 to O1 Preview to Claude 3.5 to Gemini 1.5 Pro. Um, Basically, my recommendations here, just for the record, Claude 3.5 is your all-around best pick. Just plain and simple, for a variety of reasons. One, it has the most recent cutoff date for training. I think it's April 2024. It has a decently sized context window size, which if that doesn't make any difference to you, so be it. But it's got about 200,000 token context window versus like the GPT models, which are at about 128,000. So it's about a 30% bigger. And then also it tends to do a really good job with like reasoning capability and so forth. It's doing really well in a lot of coding benchmarks. I would use that as your default. The only other ones that you might use in some cases, GPT-01 does a better, deeper job with kind of reasoning capabilities. Some customers have reported, in a moment, I'll be talking about test generation. Some customers have reported it does a fantastic job in those sorts of situations, but it is much slower. You'll see slower in parentheses. That's expected. To deliver those sorts of results, it does take bit of a deeper thought, more processing and whatnot. Gemini 1.5, the primary reason you might want to use that is if you are doing like an ultra large context size. I was talking to someone recently where they were trying to use a context of like that had like 20 large classes in it and whatnot. And so Gemini has like a 1 million token context window, so about 5 times the size of Claude 3.5. That would be like kind of the edge case where I'd use Gemini as in a really large context window size, but generally Claude just kind of wins all around from a speed, performance, context window, and whatnot perspective. So let's move along then. We talked about using the product to research things. In fact, earlier it actually pointed out to me the file where I needed to go to kind of look at like where the image upload functionality takes place. And conveniently enough, I actually have that file open right here. And so as part of this, I have this function. It's called image upload. It's about like 100-ish lines of code, maybe give or take, because there's some commented lines in here. And so one of the next things I'm trying to do then to drill in a little bit deeper is I want to understand what is this function doing. And so I'm going to go ahead and click on, you'll notice there's some header options here for Qodo Gen, as well as test this function. We'll be doing test this function in a moment. I'm actually going to go into the options here. I'm going to actually select explain. You'll notice, by the way, there are some other things in here. There's quick test, there's enhance, there's generating a doc string, which by the way, there's not really a doc string for this. So maybe this would be a good opportunity to generate one, and improve, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But right now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and click on explain. And what this is going to do is kind of give me an output that helps me to kind of break down what this code is doing. Now, one of the things I want to note here is this output is going to be very consistent. Every time you run this, no matter against what model, it's going to have the same flow. It's going to give you a nice summary at the top of what it's doing. It's going to give you an example of how this would be used. It then gives you code analysis, where it kind of says, here's the inputs for that. Here's the flow of the things that the code is doing. And then also giving me the outputs from that code. So kind of like going step by step through that to help me get up to speed. Now, this could also be particularly important if maybe this is a language that I'm not as fluent in, which actually is the case. I'm more of a Python person. David's more of a Java person. And so JavaScript's not one of my strong suits. And so this is really kind of helping me to get up to speed. Now, one of the things that I'm observing here, by the way, is that as I'm looking at this code as a source of potential tech debt, something that might need to be broken up, I'm already noticing that like some of the flow steps here are perhaps things that could be broken out into smaller components. In fact, right now, what I could do is I could come in here and say like break this function into smaller functions, and it can help me to do that, right? It's going to go ahead and generate the code for me to be able to actually accomplish that. And that's nice. However, we've got a deeper problem here. One of the other problems with this particular function is that it doesn't really have good tests. In fact, maybe it doesn't have good tests because it's trying to do too much to begin with, and it probably needs to be broken up into smaller testable pieces. But like, so while it's nice that it came in here and actually took this function, this function went on a little bit of a diet. It's like a little bit smaller and kind of broke this out into smaller components. That's nice. Before I actually make these changes, if I don't have tests in place, it makes it a little bit harder for me to go in like and to refactor this and then validate that the contract of this code is maintained. So let's go ahead and do that right now. One of the things I'm going to do is I'm actually going to run another command here. In fact, I'm going to show you that an alternate way that you can run commands. You can hit the slash key in the chat box, and you're going to see a large variety of commands here. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to run the test suite command. And as the name implies, this is about generating a test suite. Now, I want to emphasize the idea of test suite because it's not just about throwing tests at you. If any of you have tried generating tests with AI before, you know what that's like. It throws a bunch of tests in your face and you're left wondering like, okay, does that cover all of the important edge cases? Is there anything that's missing here? Or there's just a lot of questions. There's no closure. And so the way that we approach this, you're going to see this on the right side. We actually created an entire panel and user flow for this because it's not just a simple one-step process. And you'll see why. So if I go ahead and click show more, The first thing that it did here is it actually analyzed the code, the function that I selected, to go ahead and break down the happy path test cases, the edge test cases, and then other test cases that might be important as well. In fact, like, let's take a look at some of these. So right now, Happy Path successfully uploads single image file within size limit and support format. That's perfect, right? That's like your perfect Happy Path. Like ideal circumstances, unicorns and rainbows, balloons and confetti fall from the sky. This is your perfect sort of test, Happy Path test, right? Now, however, one of the things you'll observe is that under each of these behaviors that you would probably want to generate tests for, if I expand them out, we get into more granular tests, right? So like right here, up here, the general test was single image file, size limit, supported format. What if we wanted to get a little bit more granular and maybe test to make sure that a ping file was uploaded successfully under 20 megabytes, and then a JPEG file? We could even get more detailed in these sorts of tests to kind of test against these specific types of scenarios. And the same thing happens, by the way, for all the sorts of like edge cases right here, where like validate that if someone attempts to upload multiple files when max files is set to one. Upload file larger than these sorts of edge cases need to be accounted for. And all I need to do now is click on generate test, generate test, generate test. And these tests actually are generating right now as we speak down below. From there, all I need to do is click open as file. And in fact, let me go ahead and just open as file real quick. I'll save this to my downloads folder as an example of this. Yeah. And here you can see kind of the you can see that actually the entire list of tests have been successfully generated. And then if you wanted to edit them or alter them or other things like that, you can do that here. However,
Hey,
oh
Jonathan,
wait,
can I
yes,
jump in real
yeah,
quick? On your configuration real quick, can you click on that? And I wanted
yeah.
to, over in the test panel.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So if you look here, it picked Jest right away. So, Nitin was asking us. So these are different JavaScript frameworks you can use, and you're using Jest. So I think that answers your question, Nitin. That by default it's going to pick Jest, but you can pick other frameworks too, and it will generate those tests for those frameworks for that language. So
That's a
Java
great call out.
has
Yeah. So right now, I am doing Java. I am doing TypeScript, which is going to have select libraries. If I was Java, you'd say JUnit in here. If I was doing Python, I'd see PyTest in here. And so the idea is that this drop down here will be customized based on the language you're using, and it is selectable. So while we would select a certain testing framework, perhaps the most popular one by default, you have lots of other options that are available here. The other thing that I would highlight as part of this, though, is there's testing frameworks like these, but since this is also like a web interface, a TypeScript application, we also offer the ability to do other types of tests. So, like for example, functional tests. In fact, you'll notice that in the configuration here, while I am using Jest for like asserts and whatnot, the reality is I've actually used the configuration here and told it I want to actually do Selenium based tests for functional or UI testing. And I've also included examples of what I feel are good tests for this particular scenario. So this could have been just examples of good unit tests. In this case, I'm kind of directing the product to not, our default is to actually build unit tests. If you don't tell us to do anything, we're going to use a certain test framework. We're going to do unit tests. We're going to do mocks. We're going to do those things. However, if you're looking to do integration tests, if you're looking to do functional tests or UI tests in this case, you can actually guide it through pasting examples of the tests you want as well as giving those additional instructions. In fact, if I go back to the test suite for a moment and take a look at this, you'll notice that we're actually, using this as an opportunity to create like a Chrome driver in these tests. And we're actually generating and setting up Selenium as part of these. So just kind of giving you guys a quick highlight of that. The other thing that I would just finally note as part of this is that you can actually save this. You can actually create a config file. You can save that config file either locally for your own personal selfish purposes, or you can go ahead and actually upload it to your repo so that your colleagues who are also using our tool can take advantages of the same config file, because we will automatically detect that config file inside of a repo And so in this case right here, it will be a .codiumai.toml file, or you could also do a .codiumai.local toml file, with the purpose being there that this is something you could add to like a git ignore, and we would detect it and we would use it, but it wouldn't be something that would be, say, committed into your repo or whatnot. So some options for you there. So how are we doing on other questions? Any other questions that should get surfaced here, David? While in the context of testing or other things we've talked about thus far.
Yeah, when you were going with the flow, so Osman was asking this is if I add a page element in Qodo chat and write user flow for a specific page, can Qodo write the automation test case in Python for that flow? So this is my lack of, I'm not a expert in Python by any
Mhm.
means. So I'm trying to make sure I understand what it means by page elements and doing that. I'm assuming this is for a fat client. Application that for
Yeah,
Python.
so I mean, it sounds like it could easily be a variety of possible things in this situation. But in short, the answer is like, yeah, you can absolutely go to Codo Chat and be able to ask it to be able to generate those types of things that you're looking to do, those sorts of automation tests that you're looking to do. The other thing that I might also highlight, since we're talking about this, because you mentioned like a flow, right? The other thing that you can do here when you're generating code, I'm gonna step away from testing for just a moment. The other thing you can do here when you're generating code, I'm actually gonna clear out all the context. We're gonna forget about the project that I'm working on for just a moment. And what you can do when that's all cleared out, you can actually upload an image. Now, this image could be a wide variety of things. It could be an architecture diagram. It could be a database schema. It could be a Figma mockup. It could be really a large amount of things. And so when you said like flow, it was an instant trigger to me. I'm thinking, is this a flow that's like just a markdown, or is this something that like legitimately there's like a diagram of some sort? Because like if we were to go ahead and like upload an image, like in this case, I can go ahead and go to like add a mock-up here. Like this is a mock-up of like a mobile application. And like I don't know what you guys would do a mobile application, and if you'd like to, like I was talking to someone at AWS reInvent last week and I said, what do you do? And they said Flutter. Great, let's go ahead and create a Flutter app with this mockup. And just giving you, again, there's a lot of different use cases here. But like I just wanted to share with you that this is a great example of like how you could actually use an image to be able to generate the types of code that you're looking for. Now, the other thing I'll just note and highlight here is like this is also demonstrative of a more complex coding scenario. And the reason I say that, a lot of people like I haven't really talked about auto completion of code, right? A lot of you have probably seen auto completion. You probably used other tools out there that do auto complete and whatnot, and that's nice. But a lot of times, the tasks I'm trying to do aren't just as simple, like kind of like the AI pulling my leash and asking me to hit tab to complete the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. Some of these things that I'm trying to build or do could span across multiple functions, multiple files. And in fact, in this sort of situation, it's actually starting with like, let's create the main app structure. And we've got a Dart file here. And then we go down and there's another Dart file. And this is not something that autocomplete would do for us. This is something that's a more complex task, which could include other things like the example of where I wanted it to refactor this and break it into smaller components, which could also be a similar type of scenario. So just kind of sharing like appropriate ways to kind of use autocomplete versus using the chat, where the chat can definitely handle your more complex multi-step tasks, so to speak.
And Jonathan, to Adam's point, he has a question like, how do we get developers at our organization to trust AI and incorporate it into their workflows? One way on this is because we have the multi models, you can pick a different model. So like if Jonathan picked GTP, click on it, yeah, GPT 4.0 or 4.0. Now, what you can do is you can ask it, because we're keeping the context in this chat, because you can do a new chat, but that's why we have new chats and history on that. You can actually say, for the GPT 4.0, can you say, grade this solution, or you can say, can you, give me what you feel needs to be fixed in this suggestion? And it'll actually take what it's already given you and send it to GPT 4.0 and get and GPT 4.0 will give you kind of a grading on it. So, like if you did that, you just ask it, say, hey, can you, because you're using Claude, and then you say, hey, can you grade this solution or update this, solution, or give a better example? And you can start, yeah, let's just start that way. And the key to this, Adam, is I would say is that you want to talk to your developer. You're still in the driver's seat as a developer. So you should be skeptical of any of these tools out there that you just kind of blindly see it. And but what we're doing is you can kind of use the AI and the large language models to kind of go off of each other and get little increments of this. The also is to look at what you're doing. I have an 8 best practices rule. You want to keep it very small and concise of the question and being direct on what you want. If you say, create me a whole application or a whole HTTP server, it's not going to get everything correct. And it's going to miss a lot of things. So you need to get it in smaller bite-sized chunks, should I say, and be very concise on your question to get a better response. But you see, it got an A. So even the other model says that the Claude was an A.
Which of course it's an A because I'm a big Claude fanboy. But however, I would say this. Um, uh, so all of us, including myself, have had hits and misses with AI and generating code, right? Like that's just plain and simple. I think where trust really starts to come in is where AI starts to add value. I would highly recommend if there was two areas that I would say could provide like instant value and trust to a lot of people. One would be the test generation. Our whole test suite, our multi-step process in generating test is beautiful. In part, it's not just about generating tests. It's about like for a lot of developers, they come in here and one of the things they value immediately is that we're actually pointing out test cases that they hadn't thought of, particularly edge cases. And that's regardless of the actual tests themselves, they're already finding value. And so that's one piece, not to mention that none of us really like to generate tests, right? Who really likes that? Anybody raising their hand? No, no hands raised. I'm not going to even, if you are raising your hand, I'm going to ignore you. So then there's this other part here where I think another way that you can kind of like get instant value if you're looking to test our product is to actually come in here and like, let's select the file that I'm working on. Let's go ahead and select current file, and we're actually going to select the entire file in this case. Actually, sorry, we don't want to select the test file. We want to actually select this file over here. That's actually code. And I'm going to go and run this command here called improve. Now, this is basically like code review in your IDE. I love this. And so I'm going to go ahead and click on this. I'm just going to go ahead and run it as is. And what this is going to do for every suggestion we give you, we're actually going to give these like little labels or tags to help you kind of filter through them quickly. Some of these, like let's go through these. So this is more of like a best practices and consistency thing. Like that's kind of probably low importance in the grand scheme of things. It's telling you to replace inline styles with some Tailwind CSS classes. Great. In this case, this is performance. This is actually a potential memory leak issue. That actually sounds like a great thing for me to possibly implement. In fact, if I like this, what I would do is I go ahead and click show details. It would give me more details about what it's recommending. And I can even do this. Let me go ahead and close this right panel for a moment. I'm going to go ahead and click on preview code. And it actually shows me the exact code of what it would change. This is the diff. And so like it can actually help me in being able to show how I would actually implement a fix or a solution to some of these things. Let's take a look at a couple more. So this is more of a best practice readability thing. So replace the manual file size calculation with a just kind of a standard constant. Error handling, adding some error handling, performance. I didn't actually see any security ones. I guess maybe count my blessings. But like the idea here is that like if there was other types of security risks in here, another great one that I've seen like for performance is everything from implementing some caching or like adding some async or multi-threading, other things like that. So there's lots of great things that this can do to help improve your code, again, before you ship it off to be reviewed, which really kind of sets the stage then to talk about our next product, which is Qodo Merge.
And
Before I
we,
do
we
that, are there any other things that I didn't tackle, David, that you want me to
well,
tackle, or any other questions that are coming up?
well, there were some questions on Aaron had one at the top, and he's saying he's had some hits or misses with the solid clean approaches. And
Oh
so
yeah.
did we really hit on the actual
We did not talk
best
about best
practices?
practices. We did not.
Because
Let's talk about that real quick. I think this is also important because it sets the foundation for the next part of the conversation, which is if within a repo, in this case right here, within the root of that repo, you create a best underscore practices dot markdown file. We will always detect it. You don't have to add in the whole project as context. If it's there, we will automatically detect it and use it. Now, as an example of this, oh, IDE error. I love that. Can we like open that up? Can we close it and reopen it? Will that work? There we go. So a best practices markdown file. So in here, it could be really a wide variety of things. This is hopefully this inspires you a little bit. In here, I have like UI testing practices. So like I have everything from how to do tests to examples of tests and whatnot. Down here, I have TypeScript best practices. So like certain like what not to do, what to do. It's just a markdown file. It can be purely human readable language, even a document that you guys might even have internally already that maybe you just need to convert over to a markdown file and drop it in here. And we will use that for a couple of different purposes. More generally, actually, when you're running any type of function with our product or generating code, we will follow these practices. The other, in a moment as well, is when we talk about code reviews with our product. If you have a similar markdown file in your repo, we will also use those coding practices when we're talking about actually reviewing your code and Git and GitLab, GitHub, and whatnot, and pointing out if there's anything in that PR that doesn't actually meet that criteria. Another great example of this that's not included here. I mean, the sky is the limit. I was talking to someone yesterday. I was demoing this to them and showing them best practices. Like, wait a second, Jonathan, like we have a template for how people should be generating documentation. Could you include that in the best practices? Absolutely. If there's anything that you guys have for best practices and how you do things, include it in here. I think one thing I haven't tested, David, I don't know if you've tested this before, is like for example, like say you guys like deprecated a certain like API or a certain library or something like that, which we've all seen happen, right? Could we like even include like could we even include in here like you should no longer use like this library framework API version whatever, and maybe that could also help us in situations where we're doing code reviews or generating code to make sure that we stop doing those things.
yes, I kind of give something out there right now on this point of like in Java, you have imperative versus declarative, and your team might want to do this more functional style versus the older style. And a lot of times the models are been trained for like 25 years or longer for Java that have all this. And so immediately they're going to do imperative and see a for loop. And you want to do streams or something like that in Java. So you can actually explicitly put that in there. And that's answering someone's question too, is like, hey, is there's this system level kind of prompt or add to the prompt that you can use? And that's what the best practices will, because we literally just grab the whole file, we parse it and everything else like that. So don't think that you can add some kind of the next thing you'll know is like we do scrub it and stuff so there's no binary data in there for hackers and stuff. But other than that, you have just a regular text file that we're actually reading and understanding, and we're pasting that in or giving that part as the prompt. We enrich it. Now it has to be 1500 or less. So that is the case. I looked at the code too, Jonathan, is like it does. If it's too large, if it goes past that amount, it just doesn't send anything. So it's not going to cut it in half or cut half of it. And that's been a decision made so that you don't have a half of an instruction set going that could even cause worse outcomes. So you have to make sure you can condense it into that size.
Perfect. Thank you. Great examples. So let's go ahead and move into code reviews for a moment. As I do so, I'm going to be switching screens. I just want to call out a question that was in chat here. Someone brought up a couple of competitor names and asked like, how do we compare against them? I'm not the mudslinging type. Frankly, I've used some of the competition. And they're doing great things. I think that where we kind of differentiate, and one of the reasons that people are ditching some of the competition out there, some of the big players in particular, and coming to us, we've actually started to show some of those things. We're so much more than just code generation. That's one, right? We're doing the test generation is second to none. The improved command and doing code reviews and whatnot. Our context ability to kind of index repos to be able to include a best practices markdown file and use that as context. Those sorts of things are like incredibly valuable to the organizations we're working with. But then the next part that we're going into right now is actually when we're going into code reviews. We're in fact, while we do code reviews today, another thing that we just announced a preview to, you could go to our blog if you wanted to and see it, is another tool called Qodo Cover, which its purpose is actually to analyze a repo and then go ahead and generate actually running successful tests to increase code coverage in an automated fashion across a repo, right? We're doing these sorts of things, trying to cover a larger span of the SDLC, and that involves not just building tools for the IDE. And so what we're going to talk about now is another product that we have, Qodo Merge, which actually helps out with the code review process. This is actually, by the way, a real PR. This is actually a colleague of mine who saw him. And this is actually a PR for actually the product we're talking about, which is kind of ironic and funny. And so as part of this, let's talk about some of the things that are happening. First off, user description. This is what someone would have generated as part of their default PR message, right? And many of you have done this, right? The default PR message is like, why does this PR exist, right? This could be, you could be typing in details. You could be, in this case, like linking to the Jira ticket. It could be a wide variety of things, but whatever it is, it is. Now, beyond that, what we do when someone generates a PR, we automatically add additional commentary to that PR that helps both the code reviewer as well as the PR author. Let me give you some examples of this. So, the first part about this is we actually supplement the initial description with our own description. We don't change any of the initial description. What we do is we actually append that with some of the details. So, first off, we get with the PR type. This could be like new feature, it could be enhancement, it could be bug fix. It's like first kind of it's kind of like peeling back layers of the onion. At the highest level, this is what this PR is about. Then we peel back the onion a little bit further. We get into the description. So there was actually 7 commits that were part of this PR. And so amidst all of those commits and all those changes, what we do is we actually provide an up-to-date description of all of the changes that have happened as part of this PR. Now, if someone was to go and add another commit right now, guess what? That would actually be update the description accordingly. In fact, all the other comments I'm going to show you in a moment also update with every subsequent commit as well to make sure it's most up to date and relevant. Now, the other thing, by the way, if I didn't mention this earlier, while I am demonstrating GitHub, it does support GitLab, Bitbucket, as well as Azure DevOps. Scrolling down a little bit further, though, again, peeling back layers of the onion. Now, as a code reviewer, I'm in a mindset like, okay, I know what's going on here. I know why this PR exists. Let's actually review that code. Now, rather than just dumping you into lines of code that have changed, like right here, let's actually give you a kind of ease you into that a bit. So if I expand out this file by file walkthrough, I'll see before I look at the code changes. Let's see. I removed redundant code for extracting Jira tickets. I added a new function for fetching ticket data. I replaced direct API calls. Like now I can actually go, okay, that makes sense. Let's go ahead and click on this now. And I can actually look at the lines of code that were changed and make that really easy, right? Now, the next part about this is the actual PR reviewer guide. That was not the PR reviewer guide. That was just an aid to the PR reviewer. Now let's talk about some of the other analysis that we provide to be able to help out. Starting right at the top, this is actually a brand new feature. This is not in last month's webinar. Is the idea of ticket compliance. So I'm gonna be honest, like Jira's pretty ubiquitous, right? Like most of us are using Jira nowadays. Some of us might be using other things like Linear. I've seen ClickUp on occasion, maybe an Asana for project management. Some of you actually might be using Azure DevOps for project management. But in any case, the idea here is that we actually connect up with a ticket solution like GitHub Issues even or Jira, and we actually analyze that ticket to understand is it satisfying the requirements of that ticket? So we actually can see here from the code changes that it actually satisfies these requirements, but this is not satisfied, right? That's something that the code review that the PR author needs to go back and actually resolve is that there is a non-compliant requirement in here, which also again helps the code reviewer to make sure that everything's being done correctly. Going down further, we can point out there's security concerns. There's none in this particular case, but if someone did something silly and like left a secret in their code, or maybe a little bit more serious, like introduced like a SQL injection risk or whatnot, those sorts of things will be pointed out here. And then also we point out possible bugs, code smells, refactoring opportunities, things like that. In fact, I like this one, this code smell right here. It's saying, hey, this new function actually has a high level of complexity and nested logic. Consider refactoring to improve readability and maintainability. That's a great recommendation. The cool part about this, though, is while this is all nice and good for a PR reviewer, because we all know this is another area that none of us really like to do. All of us need a PR review, but none of us really want to do a PR review. And so, in those situations where we're really pressed for time and we know we need to get this done, but we don't want to just rubber stamp it, we want to actually like maybe give it at least a little bit of attention. What we're doing here is helping to make sure that we raise the baseline quality of code reviews. If at your worst, you're coming in here and looking at like the recommended areas of focus, that might be better than some of you are doing today. I'm just going to be honest. I'm not going to call you out by name, but you know who you are. And so this actually, again, it's all about raising the floor, the baseline of quality in these code reviews. The other thing that's also very helpful about this, while this is directed towards the person who is ultimately doing the code review, what happens is this sort of comment is going to get posted within a minute of the PR being submitted. And guess what's going to happen? The person who created the PR is going to look at this and go, oh crap, possible bug. Oh crap, code smell. And they're going to actually want to go and handle those things probably before the code reviewer gets involved. In fact, some people that I've worked with are super self-conscious. They don't want us airing their dirty laundry in a PR. And so too bad for them. If they want to do this, they can catch those things actually using the improve command in the IDE and trying to capture these issues before they create the PR. Otherwise, like we need to surface these things. We need to know about these things and take care of these things. The last thing I'm going to note, which is another default function in here, is actually code suggestions. So these code suggestions, by the way, are more directed towards the PR author. They are things that as a code reviewer you could look at, but these are more like, again, for the PR author, kind of like an early kind of code review, an automated code review, if you will, where where we'll actually point out possible issues. We'll score them from 1 to 10. And if I go ahead and expand this out, it actually gives me the exact code that I might even use to remediate such a situation. Um, in many cases, I think particularly GitHub, I can't remember if other ones do this, support this as well. You can actually check a box to actually just commit the code right then and there, or you could take these suggestions back to your IDE and commit that code. And then lastly, as you go ahead and make these commits, in fact, you'll notice that there's suggestions from previous commit numbers. This is just the suggestions from the latest commit. What I can do, you'll notice the check mark here. We actually track whenever a suggestion we gave was actually implemented. Even if you go back to your IDE and you don't even use the exact code that we did, you decide to solve it in another way, we track it when we actually give a little check mark to indicate that that has been remediated, and we even track that in our dashboard metrics. So if you're curious how often people are actually fixing things based on recommendations we give, that is also something available. So we are down to the last 5 minutes. I've done kind of a whirlwind tour of Codo Merge as well as Codo Gen. I would like to highlight again, Qodo cover is something that is in public preview. That is something that is on our website. We have a blog post about it and whatnot you can take a look at. And I will also highlight the other thing that I did not show you here from the Qodo merge perspective is from a code review perspective here. If you do have that best practices markdown file, when we're giving suggestions here around possible issues or other things like that, you will see a category here for organizational best practices. And if there's any organizational best practices or coding practices that are not being adhered to, we will also point them out here in the code reviews process based on that best practices markdown file. So I'm going to pause. David, like, how are we doing? Other questions that need to be addressed verbally or other questions we want to talk about?
I'm actually just I'm overwhelmed by so many.
Oh, sure. Let me go ahead and scan through.
Will be so we can go through them. Will be not.
So yes, there was a question here. Can you run the PR reviewer locally before you push code up? Yes, I kind of talked about that. How you can actually do the improve command. There is alternatively though one other thing I want to bring up in the IDE. You guys might find this helpful. There's a limited set of use cases where this can be very helpful. Which is actually not just selecting a code file as a context or even your folder as a context. But as I share out my screen here, you have another type of context that I didn't cover, which is actually the diff. So, like, what I can do here is I can actually select local changes, stage changes, or committed changes, and select that as a context, kind of like what we'd be doing for like a PR review, and then actually then go ahead and run commands against just the changes. So if I was to go ahead and select local changes, I actually don't know if I have any local changes here, but if I go ahead and like hit the slash key, one of the things you'll observe is some actually additional commands that are specific to diffs, not to like a standard code file. And that would be like if you wanted to generate like a nice commit message, if you wanted to get an updated change log, or ding 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 review, right? You want to actually do a review that's kind of like the review that we're doing inside of the PR. You can actually come in here and run that command. And sadly, I don't actually have any committed changes right now. But but you get the gist of it. It would actually generate a very similar type of output so that people can actually do these things before they create PR, which is really kind of ideal in most cases. It also really helps out people who might be newer to the organization or just maybe newer in general, like a junior dev, where they can use this as a way to kind of review their code, maybe even against your own best practices before they actually create the PR, and could actually act as a really nice learning tool to maybe even help offload some of your senior developers.
I will answer another question on this since we're on this subject is what is the score in the PR? So in
Oh, yeah, talk about it.
and this is only in the enterprise, and this kind of hits on to someone was asking too, what's the differences? And I don't have all the differences because I'm not in the idea. I'm here to advocate for the developers as being a developer advocator. So I don't hit in on all the pricing or all the diffs. There's like little blue diamonds that will tell you the differences, but I can tell you the one thing, and I thought the score was down below more. I thought they were talking
Oh,
more.
so maybe they're talking about this score, the PR score, and kind of like our superficial judgment of how good this PR is. Or there's also the score
I
right
was going
here,
with
which is for
that.
the suggestions.
Yeah, and that's what I was really going off of because what I wanted to hit on that, yeah, yes, this one. So what I was hitting on this is that there's so many little knobs you can kind of twist, and this is Natin. And what we do is we allow you to do is you can configure this so that you can say, hey, only give me nines and tens only, so that you can reduce your noise level. So not only by category where we right now say possible issues in general. I think no, our category should only be you're showing a different one, but you can change the categories of like just security issues and really main issues and problems. You can actually change all this and change your categories you want to see and also the score level too. And that can reduce your level on your PR code suggestions so if your team is saying, hey, it's just too many comments and just they're not relevant enough.
So just giving you a quick example, I know we have to wrap up here. You probably have other meetings you need to be heading off to and whatnot, but like I just want to wrap up and say like both of our products are generally pretty configurable. I mean, you probably got that impression from the idea of the best practices file. You can save a TOML file for the configuration of your test generation. In the PR side of things, we also have configuration options that are available, a wide variety of them. So like he was talking about for like the improve command, which is where we're providing those scored suggestions, you can customize everything from the number of suggestions we're providing to what threshold or score threshold needs to be met. So don't show me anything below a score threshold of 7 because I don't really care about like improving my logging or error handling or whatever. I only want to focus on major issues. There's also like in each of these commands, you also have extra instructions where if you want us to like kind of guide us in a certain direction, there's a lot of different things in here. We try to provide a great out of the box experience, but during an evaluation, we work with our customers to kind of like if there's things that are less than satisfactory to them, there's a lot of things we can do here to kind of customize it to their own workflows and how they operate.
And not that we usually hit on the sales and the pricing, but someone was asking pricing and everything else like
Oh,
that.
yeah. So we do have pricing on our website. You go to our pricing page, you can look it up. I think list price for our Teams tier is like $19 a license as of today, December 10th, 2024. But like and then the enterprise licensing is is north of that. I can't recall what the list price is off the top of my head. But the idea is certainly if that would be helpful to you, like let's go ahead and converse about that and see what we can do to help you out.
Yeah. And then one last one was someone that was asking is like, is there anything I can speed up because I'm on the latest Mac? And I would say that we're running in this is a plugin into the IDE or to the editor, be it VS Code. And so whatever you can do to speed up your VS Code or fine tune that, especially with like the JetBrains, you can increase your memory and, core size and other things like that you can do with configuring like the JVM that it's using to run. And I think VS Code, it's Electron JS underneath the covers. So whatever you can do to get like your Chrome Electron JS kind of to run faster, that will help us out just because we're piggybacking off of those IDEs and doing that. But there's nothing for us specifically, faster network or larger network too, because know that when we're asking questions and stuff, we're going off to the network and coming back. So faster connection there will show faster speed, but that's not have to do with your Mac, because we're not running the model locally on the Mac.
Yeah, agreed, agreed. The only other thing here, that last thing that I'm noticing, that we'll finally conclude. They were asking about advantages of the enterprise solution. Since I kind of brought up like there's a Teams license and there's an enterprise license. Primary thing for enterprise license is hosting the model. By default, we have a very secure model set up where like the vendor, like our backend doesn't, we don't do any model training. The AI models that we use, which is like Anthropic, OpenAI, Gemini, and so forth, we have agreements with those vendors for no training of model data, no training of models with customer data. Likewise, they have zero data retention policies in place, so they process the transaction and there's not a record of that. However, and for a multi-tenant setup, multi-tenant SaaS are kind of our default for a Teams license. Very easy to spin up, get up and going. However, for some of the large enterprises we're talking about, so we're talking like your Fortune 100 companies that we're working with, sometimes they will actually want to deploy that on their own. They want to deploy our backend actually within their own network on their own cloud. We can do that. Likewise, we can even route AI requests through their tenant for AI. So, like for example, you have like an AWS Bedrock or a Azure OpenAI contract, and you want to route the AI request through there, or even keep it on your own network through using like an AWS Bedrock. We can do that. So the idea of enterprise is really about flexibility in the deployment and being able to really kind of deploy the LLM or the our backend service in any way that would really kind of meet your requirements. And so that's really kind of there again, very much for those enterprise organizations. So we are gonna adjourn. I am seeing other questions still continue to roll in. We do have to drop. We have other meetings we have to be heading off to. But I appreciate all the interaction. If there are questions that were neglected today, reach out to us. We're happy to help. I am one of the solutions engineers. If you get very unlucky, I might be the solutions engineer that works with your company, and I apologize in advance for that. But in any case, thank you again, everybody, for the participation today. Enjoy the rest of your week, and I hope this was helpful.
Thank you.